Hello everyone and welcome back to Property Podcast today. As you know, I'm your host Lee Dayhill, and today I've got Sam with me. We're going to be talking about AI, what Sam's been up to, and so we've got some interesting questions for him. But as you all know, before we do anything useful, I always ask my guests to do an introduction, a bit about them, what they've been up to, and a little bit about the company before we start asking the questions around it. So, Sam, I'm going to pass over to you for your introduction, please.
Pleasure to be here, Lee. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all.
Basically, in a nutshell, is effectively, as a boy, I would be making property data products in the weekends, summer holidays, Christmases for free for dad and his mates.
Yep.
For their businesses. So that's sort of my early days, my early beginnings. And then from there, it's just been property, really, in various forms, from going around collecting rent as well as a boy. I was a busy boy, as you can tell. Didn't have much time off.
No time off, buddy. No time off.
And then from there, sort of post uni, went into buying land, buying properties for wealthy men and women and investors, and sort of naturally progressed into, because of that technical background and being in property, getting requests for, can you help with this? Can you help with that? And that sort of brought me to where I am today.
Sam, thank you very much. And the company we're going to speak on today is called Yield. And my very first question for you is on, in simple terms, what does Yield actually do, and what changes on an agent's website when it's switched on?
Very good question. It's effectively agents' websites, right? I remember speaking to an agent last week and they were saying they spent over 100 grand on their website. It's obviously back in the day, but really, from a marketing perspective, it's one of the only things that agents still have full control over, right? It's very much theirs. They're not reliant on anywhere else. That's sort of where people are funneled to from a lot of their marketing spend. And really, they haven't come on. They look prettier. There's a few more, little neat tricks, but fundamentally how people interact with them hasn't changed. It's still very brochure-like. So you go on, you click, I'm looking for a property, click filters, scroll. You're doing mental maths in your head. While you're doing that, you're saying, no, too far from my daughter's school, no pubs, can't be living around there. So it's effectively putting a search bar, which is very familiar because it's ChatGPT. It's ask anything about properties, about the selling process, whatever you need as a website visitor, and we'll help you, really. So that's all it is.
Okay. And with AI being pretty much everywhere right now, what's practical about your use of AI?
Good point. From agents I speak to, they're a bit sick of it. It's AI this, AI that at the moment. So really, for us, it was a lot of things that are out there are trying to change how agents work. It's sort of integrate this into your workflow, change your daily routine. And for us, it was just a case of agents already have this asset. They already have this website, and whether they, a lot of them obviously just too busy to be dealing with leads coming in. We test a lot of clients' websites for them, or we test their competitors, and we see, are they responding to inquiries from the website? So for us, it was simply, we're just making their existing website actually generate more revenue, right? By plugging into partners, let's ping leads to your mortgage guy. Let's ping leads to, whether you've got a removals guy who does removals for you, or from your website. So it's more just utilizing something that's already there. We're not necessarily changing anything dramatically about their day to day.
And how do you feel the industry's responded so far, with what you're seeing?
Definitely skepticism to start, right? I think, it's for us at the start, it was Tom, my business partner, sort of walking down, roads of estate agents, getting told to jog on a fair bit. So, to start with, it's skepticism. It's, who are these young guys? What on earth is this? Give me a 30-second elevator pitch. Why should I listen to you? Which you can't blame them for, right? Tom will go into a estate agency's office and they're getting 15 calls a day. They're getting
Yep.
emails a day. It's just bombardment. So for us, it was sort of just to say, you know, users will come to your website. Often agents we work with are surprised on how many people are on their website because they just don't hear from enough of them. They're saying, really, there's 8,000 people on my website a month, or 15,000, or whatever it might be. And it's just to say, huge numbers of people using ChatGPT, Claude, these AIs for everything from therapy is the number one use, right? People are super comfortable using these things. And many people, especially younger generation, would rather talk to an AI than they would, for other reasons. I mean, we spoke earlierly with Peter, right? And he was using an example of someone who would never have got the outcome they were looking for if they'd spoken to a person, but because they're sitting there with an AI, they're more comfortable disclosing information, and it's a less pressured environment. So we're just putting that environment on your website so they're more comfortable to effectively talk to you through the AI, ask more questions. They can have longer conversations at their leisure, right? It's not, call me when I'm at work maybe, or call me, that's always a challenge, right? With agency hours overlapping with work hours.
And from the start, what's been the most surprising feedback from early adopters?
One of the funny ones early on was an agent had basically a load of valuation leads and a load of buyer leads as well in the morning, and they were just shocked. So they were calling up Tom saying, "What do I do with it? What do I do with this?" Because they're just not used to hearing from people through the website. So that's a big one. I think the main one that people talk to us about is often when people inquire with you, because they give you such limited data, you're effectively still cold calling them. It is effectively, remind me who you are again, remind me of your situation. You're spending the first 5-10 minutes of a call sort of re-qualifying them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to say, we're giving agents on average 17, 18 data points on someone. You're getting the full picture. You understand their family situation. You understand really what we're trying to do is there's key points, right, that is often unlocked through agency soft skills, where what's going to cause a move not to go through? It's going to be someone's grandmother's unwell and she's taken a turn for the worse and they can't move now. You're trying to unlock those gems which actually impact the move. So just providing agents really with a transcript and all these data points, which is like a call before a call.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're calling them, obviously lots of people go to 5, 6 agents to get a valuation. If you're the one agent who actually remembers and is like, don't worry, John, I know that it's pressing because the kids are starting in September and you need stables for the daughter or whatever it might be, you're off to a completely different start to everyone else who is like, hi, John, can you just remind me, what your budget is again? And asking basic questions like that, you put yourself a tier above.
You do. And I think with the let's talk about a little bit around results and what are we sort of talking from an agent? What is it, more valuations? Is it better inquiries? Is it higher quality conversations? What can an agent expect?
Very good question. So effectively what we're doing is we're taking these conversations and we're packaging them up into leads and dropping them into your CRM. So when you come in on Monday morning, it can say, here are all the conversations that have happened on the weekend. We've ranked them in terms of who we think you should call first, based on obviously prioritizing the valuations. And then you can pick up the phones. It can say, John's been looking at these properties. This is what's important to him about the move. He spent 25 minutes on the website on, Saturday evening. His wife asked some questions as well, or whatever about this situation. And really, yes, we're looking obviously to drive the valuations, right? To provide this better user experience so they feel like, oh, I'd rather go to this estate agency because they understand me and I'm not going to have to go through the ringer of
Mm.
answering the same questions again. But really beyond that, for a lot of agents with, how tough it's been with, the fees declining over the last couple of decades and house prices not keeping up with it, we know that other revenue streams are really important, right? The mortgage referrals, the the moving side of things. For some it's staging, for some it's currency exchange. So we're not only providing you with the lead. If you give us a list of who your go-to companies are for those things, we can also send them the leads. So sort of just taking that off the desk for you and increasing the strength of your relationship with your partners at the same time.
And have you seen any specific examples where an agency has had, say, measurable uplift since installing or, using yield?
Absolutely. So I think it always surprises agents, right? Because a lot of them, they'll say, I get 60 inquiries a month through the website, maybe, and that's from 8,000 visitors. So from, let me do my math, 7,940, you've heard nothing, and you don't know anything about those people, right? They might as well not have visited. You have no idea who they are. You've not learned anything useful for your business. So a big one was we started basically in the southeast because that's where Tom and I grew up. That's where our networks were. And there was one in Brighton, which is where Tom's from, which has a few branches, and they were having about just under 9,000 website visitors a month, who were unique website visitors, obviously some of them going back multiple times. And they were getting something like that, something like 60, 70 inquiries per month through the website, whereas now they're more at 400 to 500, and a lot of that is obviously much richer profiles as well. So for them, it's kind of become more of a fundamental part of their system rather than something that's just like a digital brochure online. You point to people to show that you've got a website, it's actually revenue generating for them.
Hmm. I like that. And let me just ask you around um, how much work is needed. So, does it create more work for agents, or does it reduce it, or does it give them more follow-up time or more wasted time? Tell me about a little bit about that.
The key for us was always that at the end of the day, as an agent, really two things. One, you're sort of betting your time on many things, right? It's a performance-based business. You've got all these leads, all these inquiries. You've got to pick the ones to spend your time on because, you know, not every property you get on the books you're going to sell. Only 1 in 10 buyers that inquires is probably going to buy from you. So the big thing is obviously the filtering and the data points to know that you've not just got a random list of people who've left a name and a number and like you know a bit about them, but you're just a cold call list, right? To filter those people and say, look, you've had 30 inquiries over the weekend, but you can kind of massively deprioritize 25. Here are the five. And then beyond that is agents make the money, right, when they're sat down in someone's living room, right, getting the instruction. So anything that is pushing them towards that situation is the key, right? They don't necessarily want to be calling huge long lists of people all the time. They want to be finding those key people. So for us, it's always about we're qualifying leads to a much higher level. You're getting many more leads, especially valuations. Obviously, we're always conscious that that's sort of the golden ticket. So it's definitely a time saver because you're filtering the leads much, much more specifically. And when you're calling people, you're not wasting time. You're not calling people and spending 20 minutes on the phone finding out who they are. You're calling them and saying, I've got 3 properties to show you, or I know I've got 4 buyers who would be interested in your property. When can I come round? You can kind of skip that intro.
I 100% see that. And just on, for example, say an agent's thinking to themselves, my website works fine, I'm happy with what it is. What are they potentially missing?
I think for a lot of them, it's they don't even know how many people visit their website. Like you say, it's a tick box exercise. But when sellers come to you, they expect you to have a website. They expect it to look nice. They expect you to say, yes, your property will be listed on our website and on the portals. So I think it's a case of saying, you know, one, do you know how many people are even on your website? Because then it puts it in perspective of how many people they're hearing from. If you're hearing from 80 people, but you've got 800 website visitors, then maybe that's all right, right? That's fine. But if you've got 8,000 people, that's a problem, right? That's an asset that you're not using.
Hmm.
So for us, that's the big point really, is that whether you like it or not, that is your busiest branch, right? You're getting way more people there than you are walking in nowadays. So it's just
Yes.
a case of just improve the experience there. Effectively, it's like an unstaffed branch at the moment, right? No one's there. They can sort of have a look in the window, see if they like something, and then leave a little note on the door. right, for when you come back Monday. And the world's moved on. People want stuff and they want stuff now. So that's what we'd say is missing, really.
Okay. And now we're going to talk about the future, Sam, which
Mhm.
is looking ahead. Let's pretend looking ahead 10 years. What do you think a state agency will look like?
I think we're going to go back to basics in some senses. I mean, myself, all my friends have, founded technology businesses, and this is sort of a space that we live and breathe and have done since we were boys. But really, it's still about that personal connection, and I think it always will be. And I think it's about putting agents in a position where they can provide far better service to clients, which is really difficult because they're getting bombarded and they don't have time. But really, you look at, I come from the ultra high net worth, buyer level in terms of the clients that I've helped previously. And the experience they get is very different to the experience that, Joe and Jane get on the street. It's not the same. It is, you do have your own personal buying agent, you do have someone who's really got the time to take care of you. So I think that will never be automated, right? That will never be, you don't want to be getting rid of that. I think, what happened with Purple Bricks and other things showed that people don't want that, right? People do want an agent who's their agent. So I think we go back to that. I think we go back to a bit like people have in private banking or these ultra high net worths have. They have someone who is their person, right? Who really does understand them. And it's about making sure that agents spend time on that rather than necessarily admin, back office stuff, just dealing with all sorts of admin. Really, I think that's where we go to, and I think that's where the demand is, right? That's what people want. You've got to remove the friction from the move. You've got to help people feel like, you know what, yeah, I know Lee, I'm comfortable with Lee, I can give Lee a call. The service is top notch. She's really fast on the response. He's already told me he's got 5 buyers that are looking for, what I'm selling for my house. That's where we get to, I think.
Okay. And then my final question for you, Sam, which is, what do you think today's agency owners are underestimating about the next generation of buyers, sellers, and landlords?
Good question. I mean, having been a buyer and a seller and a landlord of the younger generation, I suppose I'm well placed to answer that.
Hmm.
Is really the way people communicate and the level of service people demand has changed drastically and will continue to change, right? It's my generation doesn't want to call people. They don't want to call. They want to, I know agents who I speak to love to get people onto WhatsApp, for instance, because people are more comfortable there. You've got to evolve with the times. And, we see the social media networks is a good representative of that. They're always changing. Every 2, 3 years, a new one comes up because how people communicate has evolved. So I think that's a big point, is that how you communicate will have to change. There's going to be less and less phone calls. We were speaking about it just before this call. There's going to be more of a push towards higher quality service on tap, on demand. People want it now and people want it tailored. They don't want the same thing that you've sent to 200 people. So I think that's probably what they're underestimating. Part of that is because that is such a big challenge, right? If you're
Yes.
saying to every client of mine, I want to deliver them this level of service that they'd get as if I'm only managing 5 properties for sale and they're all £5 million, is not so scalable at the average agency. So it's a big challenge, but I think that's what's being underestimated, probably in some senses because it's too big for any one person to tackle, which is why I think as an industry we have to be more collaborative, I would say. I think, there's lots of PropTech companies out there, there's lots of agencies. Yes, we're all in competition in a sense, but fundamentally it's better for all of us if we find ways to just get more transactions done, right? Then there's more money for everybody, everybody's happy enough, because at the moment the margins are really tight. It's really hard to run these businesses, right? I speak to agency owners who will say to me, Sam, I'm spending this amount and this is what's coming in. The numbers don't match. So I think that's where we go.
Okay. Sam, I want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show, taking the time to speak to us and speak to the listeners. So I do really appreciate it, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Lee. It's been a pleasure.